Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Nick Thompson. You may know me from Netflix Love is Blind, but on this podcast, we sit down with guests from all walks of life to hear their story, remove stigmas, and uncover what makes them tick. Hello, and welcome to this very special episode of Conversations with Nick Thompson. Over the season's first 32 episodes, I had the opportunity to sit down with many great guests and hear many great stories. So I wanted to highlight a few of my favorite moments from the series so far and create a best of episode for all of you today. We'll have clips with Stephanie Sarazin, Saagar Enjeti, Leslie Guevara, Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick, TJ Powers, and more. We are going to highlight some of the most difficult conversations and some of the most insightful moments that made these episodes so engaging. I hope highlighting them here piques your curiosity and makes you think, and hopefully want to look into these folks and their stories just a little bit more. As we prep for the next season of the podcast to come back in May, stay tuned because we are going to have some amazing changes to make the show even more exciting. So please stick around. And for now, here's the best of Conversations with Nick Thompson, Season 1. TJ Power, who's a neuroscientist, speaker, trainer on all things brain-based mental health.
Dopamine, original reason we've got it, just to create the desire and the motivation to go out and pursue difficult activities that would keep us alive. So when you look at hunting or foraging for food or building shelter in the cold or finding new lands for us to live in and stuff like that, all these activities, dopamine would be like this motivating chemical. It would build in our brain when we were basically chasing down hard activities that would help our group to stay alive. And the biggest thing to understand about dopamine is whatever created us, you call it God or evolution or something put us here, it basically hardwired in that we needed to earn the experience of pleasure, because pleasure was such a hard thing to get hold of, hunting the food or whatever it may be. We had to be trained that if we put in loads of effort, we'd feel good afterwards. And that's how dopamine functions. The biggest difficulty we now have with dopamine is we figured out a lot of ways to get pleasure without
instant
any effort.
gratification. Yes.
And that's like the hardest thing for this dopamine system, because if you imagine like on a graph, like if a graph like slowly curved up, like say if you take something like exercise, when you start exercising, it's not like, oh wow, I feel amazing now I'm out on this jog. Typically at the beginning you actually feel a bit extra shit. It's like, wow, I'm very unfit at the moment. And then you start running, and then gradually throughout it you start to feel a bit better and you feel better, and your brain is literally in the pursuit of a goal and it's earning dopamine. And then late on in the run, you feel pretty good, and afterwards you feel great. You've got that accomplishment feeling. But it's a nice gentle curve up and then a nice gentle curve back down. The biggest challenge we have now is we've invented a lot of things that will get the dopamine to that highest point very, very quickly. So the TikTok feed can do this.
TikTok, yes.
Yeah, TikTok is the absolute best fast dopamine thing society's ever created. China must be buzzing with that. And that's one of the challenges, because if something goes up really quickly, just like with the laws of physics of the world, if it goes up quick, it has to drop really quick. And we're all in these big fluctuating dopamine loops where we loads and loads of pleasure when we're on our phone or eating the junk food or whatever it may be. But when we come away from any of the quick dopamine, the dopamine drops, and then we sit there and we procrastinate, we feel lazy, and it can make us feel pretty anxious and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about dopamine.
So on dopamine so TikTok, I heard this a long time ago on the news. TikTok, the way that app is designed and the algorithm is designed, as soon as you open it, you're getting content. It's like you don't even have to give that click other than to open up the app.
Sure.
And that's like the difference of what makes TikTok so much more addictive than the other ones, is it just appears and then you're in the content loop. So like you go on Instagram, yeah, you might have a reel pop up, but then you got to turn on the sound, or you've got to scroll past a post, or you've got to read. So you're like kind of still doing, it's the little least amount of work you can, but TikTok, it's just
there's still a little bit of effort for sure.
Yeah.
And this is one of the challenges. Like I spend my life at these schools trying to convince kids to become addicted to YouTube, which is ridiculous that would be the solution. Obviously the solution would be less phones, but like for many that's not even an option. But YouTube, still got to go find a video. You've got to watch that video for a couple minutes in order to figure out if it's going to be of value and interesting to your brain. Mm-hmm. And that loop is like the dopamine is, you're at least in the pursuit of some kind of goal. And TikTok is the opposite, as you say. It's just bang, straight to pleasure. And the difficulty is, our brains are just learning machines, and our brains all know that now. So when we, I don't know, go to the bathroom and then you open your phone, you're like, how could I get pleasure? We know now to click TikTok because we know it's the fastest way to get hold of that feeling. And even me, like I'm someone that loves YouTube. I don't even love TikTok that much. And now my finger goes more towards TikTok because I know the speed and the pleasure, which is the tricky part of it. And TikTok is literally destroying the teenage brain. Like you just would not believe it. We train. I did like a tour around Switzerland last year, for a few months, training schools in Switzerland. And we got a load of data about their screen times and stuff, like anonymous data, so I could learn about the kids and give them the best training that we could. And we got data for the month of August because the training was starting in September. And your brain right now and anyone listening is trying to calculate a high number of a screen time, as I'm about to tell you. You're thinking, what is he going to say that's a high number? We saw average daily screen time of 20 hours a day on the phone for a whole month, 20 hours a day. And we saw average screen time. This was for about 150 14-year-olds. Average daily TikTok was 14 hours a day of TikTok. 14 hours of that.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine 14 hours of that in your brain? And the dopamine just, it's so crazy, this TikTok addiction. So I'm not that opposed to it not existing.
Leslie Guevara reached out to me and asked if I was interested in trying her toothpaste. Since there wasn't a lot of information in 2009, how did you find these ingredients and these items that were going to help you sort of make this concoction?
Honestly, I became a mad scientist. I really did, in my own kitchen. I was so desperate for my daughter to live. I know that sounds awful, but that's the honest truth, that I immersed myself. I mean, I already had 4 kids then in high school, and then the younger ones working full time, but I still made time and just started getting books, and I started reading, well, what does, what do the mints do? What do the coconut oil? I mean, I've heard of these things, but I'm not sure. So all my journey began researching, and then I found out something quite interesting. One of the things that we did at the bone marrow unit is we would sometimes have our patients, when their immune system drops, your acid and base. So you've heard of the pH balance, right? Anytime our body is ill, it goes very acidic. And the key was, I want something to counteract that. So what I need to do is research on what is not acidic, but what is alkaline, so I can pull out the sickness. And all of these products that I use, the 7 ingredients that I use here in the toothpaste they're alkaline, and they fight acidity, which is infection. I mean, that's how I was like, this is interesting. I mean, I have my notepads back from 2009 of everything I would write with the date and go, I'm telling you, I was a mad scientist. I remember that people, my family back then would tell me, you're crazy. What are you doing? Because I sort of disconnected for a little just to find the cure of, if I can fix this, my goodness, we can fix many other things, So, and that was my journey.
That's thinking back to 2009, I think to 2014, when I started making my own stuff and I started looking into wait a minute, there's a lot of chemicals here that are not good for our bodies. They're not good for our minds. And I had the hardest time in the world finding information. So 5 years before that, for you to have that rigor to go find that and experiment like that, it's really cool to see, and especially considering the impact that it was able to have on your daughter.
Yeah, you know what, Nick? The way I tell the story, it seems like it happened so quickly. It really didn't. But before I even thought of making the toothpaste for her, I had bought about 100 toothpastes all over the country. And back then you didn't have a lot of organic toothpaste, or much less some that say no fluoride, fluoride free. So I even bought toothpaste from Canada. I bought toothpaste from the UK. And on one toothpaste tube, I spent, ready, $98 for 16 ounces. And none of it helped. As a matter of fact, it made her thrush worse. So and I get you. You said 2014, and you're trying to buy all these toothpaste that don't have all these chemicals that you can't even pronounce. And there's always a warning sign. I tell people, look what's behind your toothpaste. I have not found one person other than you to tell me, what does your toothpaste say behind it? They're like, oh, I never read it, because we trust what, social media tells us, and we trust. But I tell people, don't just go by my word, research on your own. Become your own advocate for your health, right? And for the ones that you love. So it was quite the journey for me. I was frustrated. I was throwing money away left and right. And sometimes, how can I say, sometimes what you end up inventing or creating doesn't come because you're looking for it. It comes out of a huge necessity. So you're either going to go out and get it or find it because there is a need for it. And it'll happen. I mean, if the passion is there, I always say, in my experience, I call it when heaven meets earth, right? There's a big need here on earth, and there's an open heaven, and bam, all you need is that will, that desire to go look for it. And you might just, get what you're looking for,
yeah, and
find what you're looking for.
You had a life at stake. So it was like, no choice. You had to take action. You had to do everything you could and try and help your daughter.
Yes, and I'm a huge advocate about, our doctors or hospitals. I'm a nurse, right? But there's sometimes where you have to sometimes also go on your own and say, okay, like you almost feel like you're Dorothy. Like me, I felt like I was Dorothy, and I come to a fork in the road and there's two yellow brick roads. Well, which one am I going to take? Where am I going to go? They both look good and appealing. And it was really a risk for me to do that. So at this point, my daughter needed to have the surgery at MD Anderson to get that out. And I remember as I was doing this, the toothpaste, and I saw a little bit of healing. Like on the second day, I was like, oh my gosh, I think her thrush is healing. And everyone would tell me, you're just imagining things. This is not. I'm like, no, I see it. I feel it. Because there's always going to be people that doubt, but they do it also because they care about you, because it's never been done before. So there's no way this could happen. You've had diagnosis. It's affirmative. Why are you still trying to look for an answer? Because there are answers out there. We just have to be willing and desperate enough.
Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick, licensed clinical therapist. Do you mind giving a little overview of the different type of attachment styles and what causes them?
Sure, absolutely. So the first one that we talk about is anxious attachment. And so anxious is the individual who sends multiple texts in a row, who is constantly seeking out reassurance. They often get categorized as maybe like needy or insecure, and that they are the ones who are just constantly seeking out that attention, seeking out the reassurance. And that often comes from when we think about upbringing and we think about maybe a parent who was inconsistent. Maybe they were available sometimes and at other times they were wrapped up in their own stuff. And so the child was exposed, they got some nurturing, but then at other times they didn't. And so that inconsistency creates an anxiety within that child of, how do I get them to pay attention to me? Because I know what it feels like when I get attention. So how do I get that attention? Same into the adult relationships. With the avoidant, this individual is the one, they are described as having walls, or they're guarded. They're more aloof to things. And often where that comes from is in upbringing. If a parent maybe was not as emotionally available, physically or emotionally available, and so if they spent more time alone, or if they figured out that when they're feeling upset, they felt safer being alone, then that creates some of that avoidance. By the look on your face, I can see that, yes.
That's me.
Exactly. And then the disorganized or the anxious avoidant, this is a combination of the both. This is really hard to be in relationship with somebody who is disorganized, because they are the come here, no go away type person, meaning they pull you closer and closer. And if you get too close, they're like, and go away, I'm done with you. And that constant push and pull is really confusing, obviously for the partner, but even for the individual who's dealing with that, because they don't know what is going to help them to feel safe. And that type of individual often grew up in a more chaotic household. So there might have been abuse, addiction, there was a lack of safety in their upbringing. And so they don't know how to feel safe as an adult. And so they're constantly just trying to figure it out, which creates some of this chaos for them. And then the fourth being secure. And that is, they're cooperative, they're agreeable, they're flexible, they're not perfect. We have to really, nail that in, that they're not perfect, but they're self-aware and they're cooperative. What I cringe so much when we see on social media, people talk about, oh God, of course it's about the childhood, or therapists even say, well, let's leave the childhood out of it. Let's focus on the future. That's not a thing, because our childhood is our programming. And so when I'm talking about this topic, I use the term relational programming. And so truly, I have a horrible computer analogy that I've been made fun of far too many times by friends of mine, so I will not use that. But basically the idea is with, a computer, the output is a reflection of the input, I think, something along those lines. And so that's what happens to us in childhood. The way that we are programmed, the way we're programmed to be in a relationship, to handle disappointment, to communicate, to resolve conflict, all of that happens early on. And if we don't understand where it's coming from, we're just putting a Band-Aid over the issue. We're not actually resolving it. And so that is one of my most cringing things when people say, why can't we just leave the childhood out of it? Because that's you. That's how you were designed.
Right. It's your foundation.
Yes.
You can't leave the foundation out of a house that you're building. And I do think there's like space where it's like there's these little areas as an adult where you can behave a little bit better and stuff like that, and tweaks around the edges. But to your point, it's almost like a Band-Aid, because then once you're thrust back in and you're in that environment where you're triggered to go back to how you learned how to behave as a child, then ultimately those tweaks around the edges don't work. And they were just a Band-Aid that fell off, and then you have a scab that just opened and you're back where you started.
Right. And the other piece of this, and the other piece of why we dig into the childhood, is because we have to address the traumas of our childhood. All of us have experienced trauma, and more of the present day research is talking more about, it's not only if you were raised in an abusive household or severe physical neglect. So it's not only the things that happened to us, but it's also the good things that didn't happen to us. So if we weren't nurtured, if we weren't emotionally attended to in the way that we needed, that is a trauma. And that has to be resolved. We have to heal from that if we want any chance of behaving differently in the future.
That's really, really, really. Saagar Enjeti from Breaking Points and the Realignment Podcast.
Hey, I just heard on the news that there are people who literally cannot afford to leave because they can't afford gas. I'm like, I think that's crazy. And it makes sense. You need a week, 2 weeks of rations plus ability to stay in a motel. What if you don't have a family, nearby? What are you going to do? Some of these people are old. They're on Social Security. Like, they're just going to let them sit there and rot? Like, shelter? Okay. I mean, they fill up very, very quickly. What if you lose your house? You got to file an insurance claim. I mean, that's if you're lucky enough to buy a house. What if the place you rent just died? I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, what do you do in the meantime? What do you do in the meantime?
Exactly right. And it's like, there's all these questions, and everybody says, oh, we're going to help. And like, look, I hope so. Usually within a week or two, though, the country moves on. Let's be honest. Hurricane really going to be at the top of the news?
No.
No, it's not. Like, let's just be real. And I don't want to sound callous. I'm saying, like, that is why the system is broken, because it shouldn't have to be at the whims of whatever the news cycle should be. It's like these things should be intrinsic to how the economy works.
Well, I think there's like so many things that go into, because I agree with you. I don't think we'll be talking about Ian in a week.
Yeah.
And then, you say this a lot, and this actually resonates with me. Americans are like good people. We're well-meaning people. I truly believe that too. But we have a system in place, like, text this number right now to donate $10 to help victims of Hurricane Ian. And you do that and you feel like you've done something. So you kind of like let that guilt go. But the reality is these people aren't going to have houses for months. Who knows if another hurricane's going to come? And what do they do in the meantime? The insurance isn't going to Venmo them their insurance money. There's going to be an entire process there. They're going to have to rebuild or rebuy their house or rebuy a new house. And like, how does that not get covered? It's like, how does it not get covered that there's like homeless people all over Chicago? I talk about this every chance I get because